Let's make sure that we understand the importance of that third pertinent idea. It's a promise. The promise is a very simple one. That God can and will remove from us the obsession and compulsion to drink alcohol if we seek Him. And the way the big book sets it out for us to seek God is the working of the 12 steps. See how simple that is? Work the steps. The promise is that the obsession, compulsion to drink alcohol will be removed. And in fact it is. When we get to the 10th step, we find that precisely that has happened. That the problem's been solved. And that we have been restored to sanity. So if you knew, take a lesson. There's nothing at all hopeless about your condition. Quite the contrary, there's all kinds of hope, and it all comes down to this. Are you willing to do the work? Today we're going to start our consideration of Chapter 10, Chapter to Employers.
You didn't finish.
Really?
No.
You mean I'm getting ahead of myself? Tell me where we are then, Sherry.
Yeah, page 134.
Oh, well, gee whiz, Sherry.
And
Where are we talking about sex?
we finished sex.
We finished sex.
We're done with sex. The alcoholic may find.
Oh, the kids. We didn't get to the kids? Oh, all right. Well, that's important. I got a whole bunch of people who are constantly monitoring me to make sure I stay on course.
Thank God.
In fact, sometimes I think my partners think more of me as kind of like the feeble-minded uncle. They have to remind me at every step of the way. I went up to Minneapolis this weekend, and I went up by myself, and they couldn't believe it. I managed to find the right planes and get on them at the right.
That's funny.
Even going through Atlanta, which I don't wish on anybody.
Yeah.
That place is what a puzzle palace that is. All right, so we're finishing up then, according to Miss Sherry, who is never wrong about things like this. We're finishing up the 9th chapter. We're on page 134. Last week we had a lot of fun. We got to talk about sex, and everybody chimed in. We had a good discussion. Now we're almost to the end of this chapter, but there's some couple things here that are real important. This chapter deals with the alcoholic, you and me, in recovery and in a relationship with a family. And there are, of course, parallels to all of this that have to do with our relationships across the board with other people, especially where we are either working or living in close approximation with them. And so when we read this chapter, we are looking at ourselves as we recover. We must remember that this chapter is a major appeal to the family to involve themselves in a spiritual course of action. As a matter of fact, it's a major appeal to the family to undertake the inclusion of the 12 steps in their lives. Now this paragraph on page 134 dealing with the children, this paragraph I think is probably true more often than not. And I do a lot of 12-step work, as you probably know, and people I sponsor and people I work with. It's amazing how many times there's a continuing problem with children. And sometimes this thing can crop up at the weirdest place. I might have shared this with you last week, I don't remember, but I'm going to do it anyway. One of the gals I sponsor she had real severe problem, and she lived a life which was pretty bad. And she had a daughter, and this daughter was bandied about from pillar to post in the family, and never knew when her mother was going to be half nuts or fully nuts or doing all kinds of crazy stuff. The daughter had took a little time to kind of get back with her mother, but once she did, they had what appeared to be a very fine relationship. And they went together, they went shopping together, they traveled together to Europe and so on. And then all of a sudden, about a year ago, this young lady turned on her mother viciously, and began to drag up all the stuff from the past. And wouldn't talk to her, wouldn't see her, spoke harshly of her to anyone who would listen. And my friend was devastated, of course, and it's been about 7 years of a very fine relationship with her daughter. And she had taken a very keen interest in everything her daughter was doing, and all of a sudden, here she was hated. Well, we had some fun with that, I can tell you, trying to get that squared away in the mother's head, because it was driving her nuts. Finally, I was able to convince her that what she had to do was just back away entirely. Just back completely away and let things marinate a little bit and let her daughter come to her senses. And fortunately, that did happen just recently. So I don't know that relationship is totally repaired, but certainly it was a very interesting lesson for all of us, because to see how this was simmering under the surface for those 7 years, and just suddenly when it erupted, it was a real eruption. It was vicious. So this paragraph may be right on. Let's see what it says. Paragraph 2 on page 134. The alcoholic may find it hard to reestablish friendly relations with his children. Their young minds were impressionable while he was drinking. Without saying so, they may cordially hate him for what he's done to them and to their mother. The cordially hate is an oxymoron. However, it was a fairly acceptable phrase in the days when the Big Book was being written. May cordially hate him for what he's done to them and to their mother. The children are sometimes dominated by a pathetic hardness and cynicism. They cannot seem to forgive and forget. Now, there's a common saying or feeling or opinion that runs around all the time, that how children are really pretty strong, they're pretty flexible, and that they can handle an awful lot. And that may be just adult wishful thinking. When you do, or some of you are accomplished 12-step workers, I know, and sponsors, and when you do a lot of that, you find that there are severe hangovers from childhood, where there have been drinkers and druggers in the family, especially among the parents. And some of that stuff is really hard to dislodge. It may be the last of the resentments to go, because there's so much emotional content, and of course there's a lot more to it than that, because here you have children whose basic mode of living is dependency on parents, and yet they find that they cannot depend on parents, and that they're powerless to do anything about this. And this is extremely frightening. It can cause enormous anxiety, which is long term. And as we know, fear is the driving force behind all resentments. So if you're working with people who are suffering the hangovers of their childhood with an alcoholic parent, remember that what you're really looking at is not so much a justified anger, but really the results of massive fear. That was something that fear they had to live with during their childhood, during their growing up, maybe in their teen years. So what you do with them is you get them to address the fear issue. And when those fears can be overcome, it's amazing how quickly the resentment goes away. They cannot seem to forgive and forget. It is talking about pathetic. I'll tell you one of the pathetic things is to see one of us adults doing our night step, running groveling to children, begging them to forgive, when this forgiveness is not a factor in the night step at all. It's one of the things which we really, really need to know about step 9. Its function is not to engender forgiveness, although that's wonderful if we can get it. Step 9 is designed specifically for us to be set free from our own guilt, because it is our guilt, remorse, and shame which blocks us off from God. And so when we make amends, even though we receive no forgiveness, even though we are rejected, thrown out, given absolutely short shrift, it does not matter. It may matter to us on a personal level, but from the standpoint of the steps, it doesn't matter at all. Because the purpose of our making amends was not to be forgiven, but to be set free from the guilt that was blocking us from God. Yes?
I'm stuck on what you said about the child isn't as just angry. It's about that they're afraid, and you have to address the fear. What are you talking about? Their fears of what would happen to them, or what happened to them, or what will happen to them, or their fears about having, what will happen to you, to their parent, or...
Well, it's probably all the above. There's a whole cocktail of fears there. But remember, we always have to go back to basics. What is our dilemma? What is our basic problem? Lack of power, right? Chapter 4 tells us that. Lack of power, that was our dilemma. So what you're really looking at is a child is basically powerless to start with. And so therefore they are quite dependent upon their family, especially their mother and father. They have no power of their own. They struggle to gain power. They throw fits. They have tantrums. They're Miss Goody Two Shoes or Lord Fauntleroy. Any kind of role to play in order to achieve some power. But of course, none of that really works. So because they are dependent, and because they see that there is no consistency in the adult's behavior, or maybe it's consistently bad, there's nothing for them to depend on. And nobody's ever really been able to convince them that they should depend on God. They may have gone to Sunday school and heard all that stuff, but they're living with those parents. What happens is that when we sense our lack of power, and especially in extreme situations like that, it's extremely frightening, because we're adrift. There's no post to lean on. There's no solidity to our lives. We're adrift. And this sense of powerlessness is extremely frightening. And fear, remember now, because this is basic stuff too, all resentments are the product of fear. So if I hate my parents, it means that first I was afraid. And when you did your 4th step, remember you did your resentment list? With every resentment is a fear. Same way with anger. You'd never be angry with me if I didn't threaten you in some way. So when we're trying to help people, we always want to remember to go back to the basic stuff, because lack of power and fear, that's right at the base of all this. Does that make sense now? Good. Yes.
So I just had this revelation.
Okay.
That's why most children of alcoholics become alcoholics.
Well, except that we don't know for sure what the bodily function of alcoholism is, whether it's genetic, inherited, whether it's something which comes about by over abuse of alcohol. Most people seem to think that the genetic weakness that we have, which means that we don't tolerate alcohol like normal people, is probably inherited. It seems to run in families, and it seems to run in certain ethnic groups stronger than in others, which would of course be another part of the gene pool. I don't know that anybody's ever conclusively proven one way or another whether that's so, but when you look at the question of the disease of alcoholism, it's important to remember that it is not only the mental and emotional, the insanity, the obsession and compulsion, but it's also, when this happens, they can be invited to join in morning meditation, and then they can take part in the daily discussion without rancor or bias. Isn't that amazing? Look at what the big book is simply assuming is a fact, that we're engaging in morning meditation and family discussions. And this thing of meditation, by the way, is assumed all the way through the book. For example, in the 4th step, when we are studying our sex problems, it tells us if sex is very troublesome, that in our morning meditation we'll ask God what we should do about each particular problem, and that the right answer will come if we want it. There's no if, as, when, come, or maybe. It's just, of course you meditate, don't you? 7 times in the big book we find exactly the same reference to meditation as something which Bill, and I suppose the guys who edited this thing, believed to be true, that they meditated and they found it was not just valuable but absolutely necessary, because what they discovered, and the reason that it's in the big book at all is because meditation is not optional. It's one of the tools of recovery. It's just as important a tool of recovery as any other. It's certainly as important as prayer or inventory or working with others. And so here, assuming not only morning meditation, but also a daily discussion. Now what this postulates is a family that is truly coming together. And I think in modern day, we take an awful lot of stuff for granted. It's pretty much based on they ought to or they shouldn't. After all, this is what they ought to do. And then our bright-eyed friends will agree with us. Oh, sure, that's the way they ought to be. But they aren't. And it's very, very frustrating. We save so much frustration, and we save so much in the way of anxiety and all kinds of conflict if we're willing to sit down and talk about it and pray about it and meditate about it. So this is the culmination point of this whole chapter. This one sentence which assumes a family praying, meditating, and talking together as a part of the recovery of the alcoholic, but just as surely a part of the recovery of the family which has been seriously damaged by the alcoholic. And then it goes on to say, from that point on, progress will be rapid. Marvelous results often follow such a reunion. Now here's a useful hint perhaps for you. You've got somebody in your family who doesn't cotton to this meditation stuff, thinks it's some kind of esoteric or far out in space Eastern religion thing, or that in order to do it you got to be in an ashram, you got to have somebody with a saffron robe and shaved head and a bunch of symbols and incense and mantras. By the way, mantras, yeah. Got to have them mantras. And you got to sit cross-legged, and you've got to make circles out of your fingers. And,
false gods.
and all this stuff is fine. I mean, some of you may meditate that way, and I say great. A lot of people are into yoga these days, and I guess that's part of what yogas do. Is that right to call people who
Yogis.
practice yoga, call them yogas?
And yogis.
Yogis. A yogi, I thought that was the leader.
Oh.
No?
Ah, the leader. Listen to you, Jim. You're something. Go, Jim.
Well, okay, I just didn't want to be politically incorrect around here.
It's too late now. No.
God save me from PC, anti-PC, you know. That's got to be one of the worst things that ever happened to the human race, that PC stuff.
What's PC?
Politically correct.
Oh, excuse me. Bill Mayer.
Write that on your hand.
You know what? Here's a very ironic thing. We're alcoholics and we call ourselves alcoholics. I don't think anybody's ever come up with a politically correct name to call us. It's going to be souse, drunk, losers. Alcoholics probably the nicest thing, right? But aren't we substance challenged?
I like that. That's a good way to put it.
My name is Jim and I'm substance challenged.
Liquid intolerant.
Oh, yes, substance intolerant. Oh, beautiful. That's even better. You work for the government thinking this stuff up, do you? I can see her now. She's chained to a desk with a green eye shade, and she makes these, comes up with these aphorisms all day long. They're good, too, but I'm sorry, I'm just picking on you a little bit. Besides which, you corrected me on that yoga thing, so from now on, I'm out to get you.
Nice. Let it go, Jim.
That's not politically correct either, is it? Oh, my. Marvelous results often follow such a reunion. Think what that word means. The family is reunited. And reunited how? Under the auspices of 12 steps, 12 spiritual principles, with God as the guiding spirit. And boy, does it ever work. Top of page 135. Whether the family goes on a spiritual basis or not, the alcoholic member has to if he would recover. Well, that's obvious. The others must be convinced of his new status beyond the shadow of a doubt. Seeing is believing into most families who have lived with a drinker. Now that's interesting that Bill would make that comment that seeing is believing. How many of you believe that seeing is believing? Is that the way we come to believe?
No.
Ah, there's more, isn't there? We were talking, what do we have to truly come to believe, to have faith?
Faith.
And how do we get faith?
Experience.
Experience. Now you're talking. That's exactly it. Remember what we said about 2 or 3 or 4 weeks ago? You may not think I can remember that far back, but I can. When we hear it, we're interested. When we see it, we believe it. When we experience it, we understand it. How do we get faith? We get faith by taking leaps of faith. We get faith because God begins to work in our lives. And every time God works in our lives, we say, wow, hey, that worked. We may be surprised as the dickens, but hey, that worked. And over and over and over and over again. Now, analyze the 12 steps and you will see that the directions for working the 12 steps, which are in the big book, have us taking one leap of faith after another. Nowhere else do you find those leaps of faith. Go back to the 4th chapter and we find out why that's necessary. You see, everything in the book ties together with everything else. And nothing is ever left to chance. This is an inspired document. It's in here somewhere, but you just have to know where to find it. In chapter 4, the big book talks to us about, remember the bridge of reason? That most of us would like to travel across the bridge of reason to the new land of faith. In other words, we'd like to be able to figure out why we ought to have faith. But it says the bridge of reason doesn't go to the new land. In other words, it stops short. It talks about friendly hands are standing in the new land and they're saying, come on, we're here, we'll catch you. How do you get from the end of the bridge of faith, bridge of reason, to the new land of faith? You just bail out.
Head first.
That's right. You take that leap of faith. And what happens is that over and over again, as we do our 4-step, for instance, there are 5 times in our 4-step where we're instructed to take a leap of faith. And every time we do, it works. And for example, we write out our fears, don't we? And then the big book says we ask God to remove our fears and show us what He would have us be. At once, we commence to outgrow fear. Now, we didn't know from Adam's off box about this prayer stuff. But here the big book says, here's what you do. Write down your fears and what caused them and take them to God and ask Him to remove them and to show you what He would have you be. At once you commence to outgrow fear. And when that happens, then you say, wow, this stuff really works. And over a period of time, from experiencing God working in your life enough, faith grows. Bill Wilson put it this way. He said, I learned I had to pray just as if there were a God. And then when the miracles started coming and I could no longer deny that they came from a power greater than myself, that's when faith came. And he said that faith was the greatest gift of all. So that's the way we do it. And everybody, not very many people walk in this door with a fully developed faith which will stand the test of faith without works is dead. Because it's one thing to be intellectualizing faith. And many times if we've been a member of churches, we've been intellectualizing our faith all that time. But when we have to put it to work, faith without works is dead, which means literally actively trusting God. Actively trusting God. And we learn to do that through experiencing God working in our lives. It's interesting, too, if you were to ask almost anybody, what is your understanding of God? Not many people will paint the picture on the Sistine Chapel. Many will give you aphorisms and all kinds of stuff that are simply descriptive of the properties of God, but don't describe God at all. Because how do you describe something which we've neither seen, touched, or felt? However, if I'm asked to describe my understanding of God, I'm going to tell you how I have experienced Him. But that's the only way I know God, through the experience. So as you see what happens, guys, as we work the steps, we get to over and over and over again, we get to experience God working in our lives. And somewhere along the line, we have a spiritual awakening. And we come to believe. And we come to trust. So here's a case in point. Yes.
My name is Tammy. I'm now college paramedic. What I got from this, Jim, is that seeing is believing to most families who have lived with a drinker. That jumped out at me because how many empty promises did I give? So, I mean, believing me is you don't believe me. You know, you have to see it. And it takes time. That's how I got out of that. Living with a drinker, such as myself, I had a lot of good intentions. I had great intentions, and I made a lot of empty promises, and I truly believed them. when I
Well,
was
shame
making
on
them.
you for doing that. Yeah.
And
None of
I
us ever
lived in
did. None of us
tolerance.
ever did that.
But that's what I got from that. The family afterward, the family that I live with, has lived with me for a long time in my active alcoholism, and I'm a very hard person to believe.
Sure.
And they need to see it. They need to see
Absolutely right. What's your name again?
it. Tammy.
Sammy?
Tammy.
Tammy. Well, there's some women that call themselves Sam or Sam. Yeah.
Fine name.
Aren't those the ones that wear combat boots? Anyway, Tammy. Sure, that you're absolutely right. What you're saying. But that's what goes back to what we were talking about, the third step prayer. How are they going to see, to believe, if you are not acting in accordance with the
Living
principles?
example. Right.
And that's what you're right. And that's what's the 12th step say? Practice these principles in what? In all my affairs. And of course, if you're doing that, there's seeing is believing. Sure. That's why the big book also tells us that our amends to a family may take a lifetime. They may never be over because we constantly have to live up to the requirements of our steps, that we practice these principles in all of our affairs, and that we be an example to others of God's power working in our lives. In other words, as it says in the big book, our primary purpose, our real purpose, is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. And to do that requires of us not that we be carting people all around town and taking them to meetings and stuff, all of that's nice. What it really means is that whatever we do from a principled place of action. And that we are very careful to preserve our integrity. And if I can say about you, Tammy is a woman of integrity, I don't have to say anything more, because anybody who hears that will know you. And if I were to say Tammy has no integrity, I don't have to say anything more, because everybody will know you. So these are the things which cannot be replaced with words, or with new automobiles, or new stepfathers, or lots of money, or multitudinous soccer games, any of that stuff. It really comes back down to what does your child see in you that he or she wishes to emulate because they see that it's good. And in seeing that, do they come to trust you? As soon as trust is reestablished, whatever fear is there is gone, and when the fear is gone, the anger is gone. See, that's the genesis of the release from resentment and anger, is the reduction of the fear quotient. Yeah.
No, I was just going to say, when they see your change in behavior, they're experiencing it. What she was talking about, when people, to see it is to believe it, but to experience. When people see your change in behavior in your family that live with you, they're experiencing.
Oh, there's
at the
no
same
doubt
time.
about it. Sure. There's a strong connection there, and it's happening to them at the same time. You're right about it. I thought about that. That's a good point. That's a very good point. You see, this group comes out with some jolly good stuff. All right.
Case in point.
Jason? Yeah, thanks a lot.
Awesome.
Yeah. Who said that?
Terry.
You.
I'm an alcoholic.
No.
Problems.
You're alcoholically challenged.
Yeah.
Here's a case in point. One of our friends is a heavy smoker and coffee drinker. Oh my God, that's terrible. Well, just ask the people in Sable Palms. They split off and set up their whole new group because anybody who smoked is not spiritually fit. Of course, they damn near burned their place down, but one of their members was smoking a cigarette and fell down into the couch. that was a great big that was really a tickle to me. Oh yes. They don't say spirituality. They say spirituality. I am spiritual. But you cannot be spiritual because you smoke. Well, now this guy not only was a smoker, he was a coffee drinker. There's no doubt he overindulged. Seeing this and meaning to be helpful, I'll bet. His wife commenced to admonish him about it. God, if she didn't, nobody ever taught her, you can't be helpful admonishing. All it does is ring down the wall. He admitted he was overdoing these things, but frankly said he was not ready to stop. His wife is one of those persons who really feels there is something rather sinful about these commodities. So she nagged, and her intolerance finally threw him into a fit of anger. He got drunk.
Nice.
She probably had her little notepad there. Every sin of commission or omission is on there going back 12 years. I had one of those. I had a wife like that. Do you know how long it took to go through all my sins? I think I told you, 20 minutes. 20 minutes to get through the whole notebook. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Were you listening? Were you listening when she was saying all that stuff? Or were you talking to God?
No, I'll tell you what, most of the time when she started on that, I was plotting how to kill her, but
More than once.
and get away with it.
Oh, yeah. There you go.
That was the problem.
That's the key. Oh.
I was married to one of those. I did kill her.
Oh, okay.
Oh well.
Everything's sacred. We won't tell anyone.
Yeah. Who would like to be his sponsor now?
I need a sponsor.
Just say no.
Of course, our friend was wrong, dead wrong. He had to painfully admit that and mend his spiritual fences. I guess what he was wrong about was marrying that woman in the first place.
No, me?
Or was it just because he got mad?
He was drunk.
Got angry?
He drank.
You got drunk, yeah.
It's the wrong choice.
Well, anyway, though he is now a most effective member of Alcoholics Anonymous, he still smokes and drinks, thank you, coffee. But neither his wife nor anyone else stands in judgment. She sees she was wrong to make a burning issue out of such a matter when his more serious ailments were being rapidly cured. Huh. All right. So, what do you suppose happened to her? They put her on Thorazine? What happened?
You probably beat her up.
Maybe she got the message that she's going a little too far. Okay, now then. At the bottom of this page we have the only 3 mottos in the big book. For those of you who enjoy AA trivia. First things first, live and let live, and easy does it. And you say, whoa, wait a minute, where is one day at a time? Well, it ain't there. They hadn't thought that one up yet.
90 weeks, 90 days.
You know, there's maybe you guys had the same feeling. When I heard or saw on the wall or whatever it was, one day at a time, I said, so what? I mean, that's obvious. We have but one day, right? Yeah. Why would we make a motto out of that? So, let's see. Some of you have language of the heart. And there's an article in there which Bill was talking about leadership. And he's talking about the necessity of having vision. And in the process of talking about having vision, he addressed the question of one day at a time. What does that really mean? I mean, you can have your own opinion about this. So it doesn't exactly jibe with mine, but this is the way Bill described one day at a time. He says that this means that we do not, as he used the word, repine or spend time in regret of the past, nor wishfully daydream about the future, and that we live in the present, and that this is one day at a time. Personally, I asked my sponsors, what does one day at a time mean? And they were very practical guys. They like to describe all this AA stuff in terms of action, because their thesis was, and it's turned out they were right, that thought follows action. You want to get right thinking, take right action. It's so simple. You see, everybody wants to turn around. In our prior lives, we were convinced that first we had to think about all this stuff, and then we took the action, and somehow or another the action was the result of the thoughts. Since our thoughts were screwed up, we weren't responsible for the action. That's a nice syllogism, isn't it? And it relieved us of all kinds of guilt until we got too bad, and then we had to drink it away. But it's just the opposite. Thought follows action. And everything in the 12 steps has to do with taking right action. And so anyway, Father Joe and Bud Scholes said, look, here's one day at a time. Today I went to a meeting. Today I prayed. Today I meditated. Today I took inventory. And today I worked with another alcoholic. He said, that's one day at a time. Because it means that you are living your life and your program one day at a time. And when you have completed the day, you can look back and say, regardless of what happened, regardless of consequences, this was a successful day. Today, I went to a meeting, and everybody said, oh, do I have to keep? No, you don't have to, you get to. My God, if this wasn't here, where would any of us be? Going to these meetings is not a chore. It's a privilege. It's a blessing. It's a miracle that we're here. Someday when we have some time, we'll go back and look at the very thin threads upon which this whole fellowship depended in the beginning. And any one of those having been severed or not having occurred at the right time, we wouldn't be here. And there's just a whole bunch of them. It's amazing what had to happen in order for you and me to be here today. And any of those things having crashed and burned, we wouldn't. There'd be no AA. So what we're looking at then is a very simple idea. That one day at a time means we live our lives one day at a time by doing that day what we're supposed to do. We take right action that day. We do what's in front of us to be done. We do what's on our plate to be done. We don't hurt another person, and we leave the results up to God. And however it turns out, then that's God's will for us. We don't have to worry about that, do we? Dr. Paul made that clear in his story. He said, I never just sit around wondering what God's will is for me. He says, rather I do what's in front of me to be done. And I leave the results up to Him. And however it turns out, that's His will for me. And that's a formula for living, which is beautiful. And of course, that's what we have in this book. I just feel so sorry for people who refuse to read this book and live by it, because it's got everything in it that you'll ever need to live your life. It's all here. Just have to find where it is. We've been doing this now for a year and a half together, and the whole purpose of this is for us to find out where everything is, so that we can see how it all ties together, and we'll be able to go right to it and get the stuff that we need. One time around won't do it, obviously, but cause I've been doing this now for almost 39 years, and every time we do this together, I learn some more stuff that I didn't see before. because the big book is so bloody dense. It's the densest writing I've ever read, and I do a lot of reading. It's more dense than trying to read about quantum physics. At least I have a quantum physics book for dummies, so maybe if... But anyway, this book has the answers, and if you don't know the answers or have trouble finding them, get somebody to work with who does, who's been around for a while. It's all there. Holy cow, where does the hour and a half go with you guys? I don't know. Anybody want a chip today? There we go. We need a chip presenter, quickly. Come on, dear. You get to be a chip presenter.
Here. Oh, me?
Yeah, you.
Okay.
Quit being politically correct. Get up here.
Well, I'm just, I don't even know what to say except my name is
No, it's
Terry
right.
and I'm an alcoholic.
Well,
Terry.
how many? What do you need?
I'm taking a white chip.
The
A white
chip.
chip. Okay,
So what
now
do I say?
there we go.
So
Come
you
on
have
together.
right. Bless you. What's your name? Susan.
All right, Susan.
All right.
All
Very
right.
nice. Very nice.
Now everybody leap all over Susan as soon as we finish the meeting.
Get a sponsor. Get a sponsor. No.
Oh, wait a minute. Oh, we got Vincent here too.
Oh, all right. White chip. Congratulations. All right. I get to hug everyone, right?
Yeah, see, well, he finally got up the courage when he saw he got to hug you.
All
That's,
right. Thanks. Anyone else need a
if
chip?
I was giving him out, he wouldn't have come up. I'm just kidding. Anyone else? She's asking. No?
Fine. I'm sitting down.
3, 6, 9 months, a
Keep
year.
coming back.
Well, some of you can, yeah.
Oh. I'm so sorry, right?
Well, all you politically correct types will have to stay home on Sunday night. I guess everybody's ready to go.
Thanks, Jim.
We want to stay. Come
Oh,
on.
all right, let's close the
Show your
meeting.
knowledge.
Close the meeting. Yes. There's. Let this circle, whoops. Well, hooked up now. Let this circle represent the unity of our fellowship. A moment of silence for those who are still suffering, and then we'll say the Lord's Prayer together. Please do me a big favor, guys, and when we finish the prayer, let's not say anything beyond amen. That means so be it. Thank you. Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Thank you all so much for being here. Pretty week. I will see you. God bless.
Thanks, Jim.
You're going to be over here.
Good.